So 2021, I think we can all collectively say that it wasn't the best year of our lives. There were many hardships we still had to deal with over this last year, but you know what kept us all going? Anime. Anime over the past year was really solid. I feel like there were quite a few shows in every season that were really good and were able to keep me entertained. There were a few seasons where I saw some people say that there wasn't anything to watch, and to them I say, you didn't look hard enough. There was so much good anime that came out over this past year that it is kinda hard to keep track of. Am I saying 2021 was the greatest year of anime of all time? No, definitely not, but there were some bangers that seemed to somehow go completely unnoticed by most of the community that I really want to shed a light on. This past year, at least for me, wasn't just a good year for newer anime, but I also watched a bunch of older anime that I should have watched ages ago, like One Piece and Bleach for example. So with all of that being said, I think it is time that I start discussing some of the amazing anime that came out this year. Firstly, I want to get the obviously amazing ones out of the way. Stuff that we all know came out and collectively all liked. Things like Attack on Titan Final Season Part 1 and ReZero, as well as That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime Season 2. There was also Mushoku Tensei and Dr. Stone Season 2, and that was all just in the winter season. There were other amazing shows that came out later in the year like Tokyo Revengers and To Your Eternity. Honestly, all of those anime were either already amazing before and just got better with their sequels, or really got a chance to take the community by storm like Tokyo Revengers and To Your Eternity. This last year for anime was stacked with so many amazing shows, but now that I got all the bigger name shows that we all loved out of the way, now I want to highlight some of the low-key shows that came out this year that I thought were really good, and for that I'm going to go more in depth on because I want you guys to check these series out if you haven't. Okay, so for the winter season, there are two shows that I would like to talk about a little bit. One of them is a bit more known. Hell, I even made a video on it myself, but I would still like to briefly mention it, and that is Wonder Egg Priority. This show was really good throughout the entirety of its run, all the way through to the ending, which tragically dropped the ball, but this series is still a series that I recommend as it covers depression and friendship and family in a very unique way that I think still works really well and still makes for a really good show. Okay, now that that one's out of the way, let's get to the main show I want to talk about, a show a little more low-key. That show is Kimono Jihen. Kimono Jihen is a newer shonen series that came out earlier in the year and I felt like was really good. There was a lot that I wanted to talk about in terms of this show. I even wanted to make a video on it back then. That didn't happen for other reasons, but this show was really good. This anime knows how to handle its characters in a very satisfying way. All of the characters are entertaining to see on screen. Plus, all of their development they get throughout the 12-episode run is actually quite insane. It wasn't just the characters that made the series interesting. The world was also quite interesting with really weird and unique powers that make some really interesting fights as well as some backstories. One thing I must say about this show though is that the animation is only okay. It's not bad, but it's not amazing either. Like, you get what you expect out of it, and that's okay. This anime was kind of destined to be more low-key anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Everything about this show comes together nicely and makes for a really entertaining show, and one that I do wish more people would talk about. The spring season wasn't a season that was anywhere near as stacked as the winter season was. However, there were still a few really good shows that were pretty low-key that came out. Of course, we got shows like Vivi Florida Song and 86, which both came out, but I'm not here to talk about either of those shows. If you want to see my opinions on them, you can check out my videos on both series. I'm here to talk about two more series that were more low-key and didn't get enough attention at the time of their release. One of them has grown a little more popular after it finished though. So the first one, which I'll only briefly mention as it's a more popular one, and there's definitely better videos of the series out there, and that is Odd Taxi. This series was a really entertaining mystery show that really had me on the edge of my seat the entire time I was watching it, as it really made everything feel intense as well, so if you haven't, then I recommend you watch this series if you haven't. Okay, now it's time to get to the more low-key show, and one that I really enjoyed and felt like more people should be talking about, and that show is Shadow's House. This series has a very dark atmosphere around it and a super interesting world to explore. The characters in this series are exceptional. We get to see a lot of character growth as well as the motivations for each of the characters as we go through the story. Somehow, this anime was able to keep me invested the entire time I was watching it, by making the mansion seem like a vast and open world with mysteries and that we can explore forever. Even after the first season, there are still so many things that we need answered, and I love that because that just builds up to the suspense a lot more. This show knows exactly what it is and it doesn't try to hide it. Honestly, there's quite a lot to discuss about this show and I can go on and on about it for a while, but I won't. I will say that you should check this series out however, because it is an amazing show with solid animation, amazing characters, and an interesting world to explore. The summer season was another season that I would call stacked. It had a lot of amazing shows coming out at the time. The only thing I will say is that the community was quiet during this season. Despite all of the good shows coming out, no one was talking about them. Sure, there were a few shows that got some spotlight like the Aquatope on White Sand and Remake Our Life, as well as some of the isekai anime this season, and even the anime I want to talk about for this section, Kageki Shoujo. You see, despite the show having a few people talk about it, I still feel like this show hasn't gotten anywhere near as much love as it deserves. This anime is amazing. It has some amazing characters that all have massive amount of growth throughout the series. It also has some really solid animation. Not the best, but not terrible either. It is definitely above average, but I think where the series truly shines is with its story. The story for this anime is on another level. I love stories that follow the topic of fighting for your dreams. Of course, if you look at my channel and see how many videos I've made on the topic, that wouldn't come off as surprising, but either way, this series covers that topic and does so in a very interesting way. It doesn't really pit any characters against each other like the traditional sense. Like sure, all the characters are rivals to each other, but they're all also friends who support each other and want to see each other do well, and I love that. But this series also explores the dark side of following your dreams, the feeling that you're not good enough, the feeling about running away from your past. It covers these topics in a very mature and realistic way that really makes the entire series come together for me and makes me really love the direction the show takes further down the road. And finally, we get to the winter season. This season, once again, was stacked with a lot of really good shows. Of course, as with most things, this season, not a lot of people are talking about a lot of the best shows. I made 2 videos on series that I felt were completely underappreciated in this community. The first one being the Heike story, a beautiful anime that portrays the downfall of the prominent Heike family from history. The second one being Ranking of Kings, a story of a boy becoming a man, but it's a very different type of story and doesn't take the same approach that most shows that cover this topic do. There were other amazing shows this season as well, like Blue Period, and a personal favorite of mine, I was kicked out of the Heroes Party because I wasn't a true companion, so I decided to have a slow life. I know that's a long title, but it was a really wholesome anime that honestly carried me through some really dark days I had throughout the holiday season. But I'm not here to talk about any of those shows right now. The show that I'm going to be going more in depth on is Attack Dog Destiny, a really unique anime. This anime had a lot of hype going into it due to the fact that 2 big name animation studios, Madhouse and Mappa, were working on this series, in which it definitely lived up to the hype. The animation for this series is obviously amazing every episode, every fight. It is also very smooth and puts pretty much everything else to shame from the last season. But besides the obvious, let's talk about the story and characters for a bit. The characters were really good. I like the entire cast from the main characters to the mentor and even to the villains. They were all super interesting characters. The story for this season was also cool and super unique. It's not every day you see a series where music is used as a weapon to fight against the enemy, but can also be used as your biggest detriment as well. Having music be a double-edged sword and making the main character obsessed with music really made for some really interesting conflicts. We also got to see how everything got the way it did, and it was really interesting. I recommend this series if you didn't watch it last season because I know for sure you will like it. Was 2021 a good year for anime? Long story short, yes. This past year was a really good year for anime. It had a lot going for it and a lot of shows that lived up to my expectations. I'm excited for 2022. I can't wait to see what kinds of amazing shows come out this year, as I'm sure this year will be another fantastic year for anime.